Good evening, welcome to Crime Beat. I'm Anthony Robart. Tonight, it started as a beautiful day of canoeing and picnicking and ended in tragedy.
He said we both fell into the water. When I came up, she was gone. Bert had said, she punched me so hard, I was forced to let her go.
I have some terrible news, Jean. He said, Arlene's gone.
They weren't wearing life jackets, not the strongest of swimmers.
I literally screamed. I said, Mom, this is not an accident.
We all phoned the police.
Her divorce lawyer contacted our CMP. That's the moment that changed everything.
I was a little shocked by the way the investigation had unfolded.
For whatever reason, the Crown's office blew the whole thing up.
Justice for Arlene! Justice for Arlene!
Did you kill your wife?
Sorry?
Here now is reporter Jules Knox with Arlene Westervelt. Murder or misadventure?
Canada's Western Province's slogan is Beautiful British Columbia, and its Okanagan Valley is no exception. Within it is Lake Country, the perfect place for a peaceful paddle. It's where Bert and Arlene Westervelt set out on the afternoon of June 26, 2016. It was calm, clear, and warm. But that day, tragedy struck.
The man and woman were just 30 meters off the shore when their canoe capsized and both of them fell into the water.
Emergency crews rushed to the scene around 7:30 in the evening.
We had firefighters, about 15 firefighters in with life jackets doing a search, kind of a grid search in the area to see if they could see her.
An RCMP dive boat scoured the deep waters looking for Arlene. The search called off at nightfall, but resumed early the next morning. Arlene's lifeless body was found around 11 a.m. and pulled from the lake. On the surface, Arlene's death appeared to be an accidental drowning.
They lost balance in the canoe. They weren't wearing life jackets, not the strongest of swimmers. It's a tragic accident that possibly could have been avoided. And we feel for the victim and the families and everybody involved.
The biggest heartbreak anybody will ever have is to lose a child. You can't sleep, you can't eat. You're just missing a part of yourself.
Happy birthday to you.
Every mother thinks her child is precious. She was my precious middle child.
This is Arlene's 30th birthday.
The 56-year-old Okanagan nurse with an infectious giggle loved hiking and traveling.
She made me laugh. She was really special. I just miss her so much.
Arlene's enthusiasm for exploring started in the early 80s during a trip to Australia with her sister.
I sold everything and quit my job. We bought one-way tickets.
And it was on that trip that Arlene met her future husband, Bert Westervelt.
She came home and they just were together since then.
Good morning. Hi. How are you? Welcome to the Westervelt residence. All right.
You know, this was her boyfriend, and they got along great, and they did lots of fun things together, and I thought everything was good.
Bert and Arlene married in August of 1986.
What are you two up to, giggling about?
No guy is ever perfect for my daughter, but he was a nice enough guy.
Oh, my wife's getting dirty here. Remember in her bedroom this morning?
Oh, do I ever.
You went in there?
Just about cleared my...
The day after Arlene's death, before her body had been pulled from the water, Bert started making phone calls.
And he said to me, I have some terrible news, Jean. He said, Arlene's gone. And I said, what do you mean gone? I got in my car and I drove to my eldest daughter and I walked in the door and I said, Debbie, Arlene's dead. And she screamed and screamed and screamed and screamed.
Shelley Westervelt was married to Bert's brother Ed at the time.
Bert had called my husband at 7:30 on the 27th of June. The next words out of my husband's mouth was, what do you mean she's missing? I came and looked at my husband and he had this look of horror on his face.
As soon as they learned of Arlene's death, Shelley and Ed rushed to the Okanagan to be with Bert.
I loved Bert. I truly did. We had a wonderful relationship. I cared very much for Bert. He made me feel very welcome. And I liked him. I liked him a lot.
3 days after Arlene died, the coroner, having no concerns, relinquished her body to be embalmed. Officials initially saw no need to order an autopsy confirming Arlene's cause of death. Neither did Bert.
I had personally asked him, Bert, certainly you want an autopsy. He said, no, Shelley, I don't. You know, my poor sweetie, these were his words, my poor sweetie has been through enough. I can't bear the thought of him cutting her open. I just want to leave her be. Of course, in the early days, I believed everything he told us.
Coming up, was Arlene's death an accidental drowning, or was there motive for murder? A call from a divorce lawyer turns the case upside down. Welcome back to Crime Beat. Arlene's family questions her husband's account of events as suspicions arise that her death was not a tragic accident. We now return to Jules Knox with Arlene Westervelt, murder or misadventure.
After Arlene's death, Shelley Westervelt heard Bert tell the same story over and over, that his wife reached for a bottle of water and the boat tipped.
He said we both fell into the water. When we had resurfaced, Arlene was hanging on to the bow and I had said to her, honey, hang on to the bow, it floats. He said, I proceeded to dive 2 or 3 times under the boat to retrieve those life jackets, and when I came up, Shelley, she was gone.
How did the story change?
It was 2 months later that Bert had phoned my husband's cell phone. He and I were sitting at the table, and Bert had said, Ed, I need to talk to you. That story of Arlene's death is not what really happened.
According to Shelley, Bert said that after they capsized, Arlene surfaced and made her way onto the overturned canoe. But he was worried she was going to tip the boat onto herself, so he pulled her off.
She went under. My husband asked, did she ever resurface? No, she did not resurface. But I tried to grab for her, and Ed, she was fighting and punching and resisting so hard that I lost grip of her. But I was able to get her again. And when I grabbed her wrist and had her wrist out of the water, Ed, she punched me so hard to my left shoulder. I was forced to let her go. I was still fishing with my legs to see if I could feel for her. I knew she was going down. That was the change of story.
Why do you think Bert's story changed?
I believe people change a story to get out of a lie. I don't believe you need a good memory if you're telling the truth. After that phone call, my husband went into the bedroom and fell apart. My husband said to me, what the hell has Bert done to Arlene?
Arlene's sisters say they were immediately suspicious when they heard she died while canoeing on a calm day with her husband.
I knew instantly that he killed her. I just screamed it out. He killed her. He killed her. I know he killed her. I knew it. There was no doubt in my mind.
As soon as I heard that, I just screamed. I literally screamed. I said, Mom, this is not an accident. I said, he's done something to her.
We all phoned the police and told them this was not an accident, just like I was brushed off.
The first conversation I had with the coroner I begged him and pleaded with him to do an autopsy, and he said there wasn't going to be an autopsy.
And there wasn't an autopsy to confirm Arlene's cause of death at first. But then Arlene's divorce lawyer stepped forward.
That's the moment that changed everything. Her divorce lawyer contacted our CMP and told him that she was his client.
That phone call prompted Mounties to start a murder investigation. 10 days after Arlene died, her body was finally autopsied to determine her cause of death. And seeds of doubt were sown in the minds of some of those who had previously believed Bert.
This is the location where they found Arlene's body.
Don Hennig is Arlene's uncle. He was on the lakeshore with Bert the day police found her body.
She was just like a daughter to me. I was very close to her.
What went through your mind when police told you that Arlene was missing?
I honestly at that time believed it was an accident.
But Don keeps a diary, and looking back, there's one entry in particular that stands out.
Arlene stopped by for a few minutes last night, was crying. I asked her what was wrong, and she didn't want to talk about it. And finally she said to me, I guess all married couples fight. And that was the last time I saw her.
12 days later, Arlene was dead, and her family was trying to figure out how this tragedy could have happened.
I couldn't believe that this child of mine that was so water savvy in an area that she knew would drown. I couldn't believe it.
Jean Hennig says her daughter always wore a life jacket.
She was a very strong swimmer, and she loved the water. And this is my wonder about why she drowned.
Jean visited Arlene in the weeks before she died.
I sensed there was tension. She and Bert would talk in private, and then she'd come back with tears in her eyes.
And during that trip, Arlene gave her mom something to remember her by.
A mother holds her child's hand for just a little while, and in her heart forever. And I just said, honey, I don't need anything to remember you by. And she's had this strange look on her face.
Jean had no way of knowing it would be the last time she'd see her daughter alive.
When she took me to the airport, she just looks so lost. I got to the security there, and I just dropped everything and I ran back and I hugged her, and there was just something strange about that last hug. And she was crying and I was crying and her body was trembling, and I said, honey, it's gonna be all right.
Arlene's sisters believe the couple's troubles had been brewing for some time.
She said, he told me that if I ever left him and tried to take his money, he'd have ways of making me disappear and nobody would ever know.
I knew he had that other side of him.
The last 3 phone conversations I had with her, they were all very secretive, and I think she finally had enough. She had told me that she wanted to get rid of the toxins in her life, and she wanted to do it sooner rather than later. She never came out and told me, but I got the sense that she was going to leave Bert. And I just had a really uneasy feeling.
About 9 months before Arlene's death, Shelley says her husband Ed told her the Westervelt marriage was on the rocks.
He said, yeah, it looks like they are heading for divorce. My husband said, not a chance in the world will Bert ever divorce Arlene and risk losing 50% of everything he's earned.
What was Bert's demeanor in those 8 days after Arlene's death when you were visiting?
I would describe him, Jules, as very stoic. Never once in the 8 days that we were there did I see him shed a tear.
We know that allegations had been made by Arlene's sisters at that point, but had you heard about any of that? Did you know that there was a cloud of suspicion over Bert?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There wasn't a shred of doubt in my mind at that time that this was nothing more than a tragic accident.
And it only changed for you 2 months later?
2 months later, and then a number of inconsistencies. I wanted answers after he had changed his story.
And Shelley has questions about the life jacket and why Arlene wasn't wearing one.
Arlene always wore a life jacket. I find it very hard to believe that she was not wearing her life jacket, and I believe the reason she wasn't was because she could not. Because I believe that Arlene may not have even been alive when that boat tipped over.
What do you think happened?
I think Bert Westervelt knew the writing was on the wall that his marriage was over. And his life as he knew it was going to be crumbling down very, very soon. I believe he murdered Arlene.
Eventually, the police and Crown prosecutors also believed Bert killed his wife. In April 2019, they charged him with the second-degree murder of Arlene Westervelt. At the time, police called it a tragic accident, but now they're saying it was murder. Close friends of Arlene say they were suspicious all along.
100%.
Yes,
absolutely.
100%.
Yeah, there was
as soon
no
as
doubt.
we heard the news, it was.
No doubt.
It was, yeah.
But at that first court appearance, there was also a second side supporting Bert.
Anybody who knew him wouldn't think anything like that possible because he loved his wife very much.
But the autopsy had raised a chilling possibility. Although it couldn't rule out a heart condition or drowning as a cause of death, it suggested Arlene might have been strangled. And the Crown appeared to be ready to argue either that Bert had strangled his wife or that he drowned her.
By then I felt as though my sister-in-law had been killed by her husband, and I could not let it go. I needed answers. Arlene would deserve answers.
And this ended up costing you your marriage?
Yes, it did. I loved my husband, and I know he loved me. For some reason, he needed to stay in support of Bert, and I could not.
Then, in July 2020, in a stunning reversal, the Crown announced it was staying the murder charge, offering no explanation why. That effectively brought the case to a halt just 2 months before the preliminary hearing was supposed to start.
We asked what changed. We were told they could not give us that information.
Once again, the family was outraged and demanding answers. They held a rally at the Kelowna courthouse, and they hired a lawyer.
So in this case, we had a preliminary inquiry that was scheduled for multiple weeks with dozens of witnesses, and for whatever reason, the Crown's office blew the whole thing up.
Next on Crime Beat. Questionable conduct by a Mountie and clues contained in a coroner's report. Did they explain why Bert Westervelt's murder trial did not go ahead? Were Mounties protecting one of their own? As Arlene's family continues their search for justice, there are allegations of possible interference by a senior officer in the case. We now return to Arlene Westervelt, murder or misadventure.
What happened near the shores of Okanagan Lake on June 26, 2016 is shrouded in mystery. Arlene Westervelt spent the day canoeing and picnicking with her husband when their boat tipped. Bert claimed Arlene drowned. Her sisters immediately called foul play.
She was then found just on the edge of the deepest part of the lake. Had that body gone past that edge, that ledge, her body likely would have not been found.
I believe he was probably shocked that they found her. I don't believe that was his intention.
But Arlene's body was found. And as it was pulled from the water, that's when things started to go wrong in a series of events that shouldn't have happened, but did.
Now, what occurred in those early days is still unclear, and it certainly does have something to do with Brian Gately, who was then an inspector with the RCMP.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone.
Brian Gately, a high-ranking Mountie seen here at a press conference with BC's anti-gang unit. Arlene's family believes he and Bert were close. The men say they were more like casual friends or acquaintances. Their wives worked together. In the days after Arlene's death, but before a murder investigation was launched, Bert asked the Mountie to use RCMP resources to unlock his dead wife's cell phone. He says he wanted pictures from their last day together. Others think his motive was more sinister.
I believe he wanted to find out what secrets her phone held that could potentially incriminate him.
At any rate, Gately got another officer to unlock Arlene's phone, even though as a veteran Mountie, he should have known that could be a serious breach of RCMP conduct.
Hard to comprehend how an officer, especially one of his training and rank, could justify using RCMP resources to crack a phone in that manner.
Gately's boss found out, and an internal code of conduct letter was written up. It alleges Gately asked a colleague to use a specialized phone hacking tool called Celebrite for personal or unauthorized reasons. In a letter to Arlene's sister Debbie, Gately admitted he had the phone unlocked. But he writes that was only after confirming with investigators that RCMP were not interested in its data and that Arlene's death was being treated as an accident. But there's a problem with that too, because there's another allegation in that code of conduct letter, and this one could have doomed the case from the start. It claims Gately weighed into Arlene's death investigation with his personal opinion in a potential conflict of interest.
If he knew a party in the matter, that being Bert Westervelt, he should have checked himself out immediately, and he didn't.
Yeah, regarding your question,
even though Gately was not assigned to Arlene's case, Oliver believes the high-ranking officer might have convinced investigators to treat the matter as an accidental drowning instead of a suspicious death in those crucial early days.
There were internal charges that occurred which alleged that Brian Gately had essentially interfered with the investigation, had thwarted the efforts of those members who did see it as a homicide and did see the need for an investigation, including an autopsy.
But Gately didn't address that allegation in his letter. He did say that he was not involved in the investigation and claims that his actions did not in any way compromise the investigation or the prosecution. But after Arlene's phone was hacked, it was returned to the man who would later be investigated for her murder. Through his lawyer, Gately denies any wrongdoing, but declined an interview, saying he can't comment publicly because of an ongoing civil case that Arlene's family has since launched against him. Although RCMP became aware of the allegations against Gately in December of 2017, that conduct letter wouldn't be written for another 9 months. According to civil court documents recently filed by the government, in early 2019, RCMP found Gately guilty of engaging in a potential conflict of interest and misusing RCMP IT equipment. In Gately's civil response, he says the investigation concluded there was a perceived conflict of interest, not an actual one, and that no sanctions were imposed. But a month later, Gately resigned, and the same man who signed Gately's conduct letter also happened to be the top cop at BC's organized crime agency, where Gately landed his next job.
He went out as a hero, retired from one position, out the front door, full RCMP pension, and in through the front door into a new position of power and trust.
Brian Gately, whether he aided and abetted or obstructed the RCMP investigation, those certainly are potentially criminal charges.
Gately was not charged criminally, and he says he was told the reason the murder charge was stayed was because of new evidence regarding the pathologist's report and not related to his conduct. Do you think there's a cover-up here?
I do. And I'm really concerned that somehow, some way, this has influenced or had some impact on this prosecution and not moving forward.
The police complaint commissioner has confirmed the organized crime agency, where Gately is currently employed, ordered an investigation into his conduct. In court filings, Gately indicates the investigation relates to the letter he wrote to Arlene's sister, Debbie.
I believe Bert Westervelt may very well get away with murder because of interference caused by a high-ranking member of the RCMP. It is disgraceful. It is wrong, and it is not fair. Arlene deserves justice.
Coming up.
Did you kill your wife?
Sorry?
In our exclusive interview, Bert Westervelt tells his side of the story. As questions surround what really happened that fateful evening on the lake, we speak to the only witness to Arlene's final moments. We now return to Jules Knox with Arlene Westervelt, Murder or Misadventure.
Bert and Arlene Westervelt were together for 34 years, married for nearly 30.
And this is Mr. and Mrs. Bert Westervelt.
But after Arlene died during a day of canoeing and picnicking with her husband, a cloud of suspicion fell on Bert. He's telling us his side of the story from outside the home he once shared with Arlene.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How did you meet her?
I met her in Australia, and she ran out of money, and so she got a job at a bar, and it happened to be the bar that we frequented, so.
And what did you think of her when you first met her?
I thought she was beautiful. Yeah. Incredibly beautiful.
How would you describe your relationship with her? What was it like?
For the most part, it was great, but you know, in a 34-year relationship, there were ups and downs, but yeah.
Several members of her family say that she was upset, that she was crying a lot about your relationship right before she died. What do you make of that?
It's news to me. I mean, we had some wonderful days.
Were you aware that she was that upset?
No, I wasn't. No.
When did you learn that Arlene was talking to a divorce lawyer?
Well, I can't answer that. My lawyer has asked me not to answer that.
Was there something that you think might have triggered her to go speak with a divorce lawyer?
Not to my knowledge.
How would you have reacted if she had told you she was going to divorce you?
Would have been devastating, yeah. Yeah. You know, it's not the outcome I would have wanted.
Would you have been worried for what you might lose?
No.
Arlene's sister told us that you said that to Arlene that you could make her disappear if she ever left you or tried to take your money. What's your response to that?
It's absolutely ridiculous.
You never said that?
No.
Not even in the heat of an argument?
No.
Why do you think her sister would say that?
We've had a tumultuous, we've never gotten along.
What was the source of the friction in that relationship?
Just the way they treated Arlene. They always badgered her, always, for her, her eating habits, her way she dressed, the way she tipped.
The sisters have told us that as soon as they learned something happened to Arlene on that canoe trip, they immediately suspected it was you. Why do you think they would say that?
I don't know. You'd have to ask them. I think it's a hatred, yeah.
You think it's a hatred?
They hate me. So it's as simple as that, really.
What did you think when you first learned that the sisters did suspect you?
It was a shock. It was a shock, yeah.
What can you tell us about the day Arlene died?
We had a great day,
Bert says it was the couple's first canoe trip of the year. They paddled several kilometers from a spot south of the Okanagan Center boat launch to McKinley Landing and back. And shortly before they reached their truck, Bert says Arlene spotted the perfect place for a picnic.
She said, "Why don't we get some supper and come back?" We loaded up the canoes in the truck, took it home, and Arlene went into Winfield and bought some things for supper. And then I cut up some stuff out of the fridge. We drove back down, loaded the canoe in the water and all our stuff. And then we went to that point and yeah, we had a really nice supper.
It was on that short paddle back that the canoe capsized in calm waters. And whether there was a struggle in the lake between the couple that cost Arlene her life, or if she was even alive when she hit the water, only Bert knows.
We've always heard that Arlene was super safety conscious. Why wasn't she wearing a life jacket that day?
Yeah, I can't, we're getting to that point now where I can't, my lawyer has said I can't talk about it.
Bert's lawyer would not let him comment on any of the specific events that led to Arlene's death, because at the time of the interview, the case was still technically before the court.
What do you remember from the days after Arlene died?
It's pretty much a blur of emotion. Lots of tears, lots of friends, lots of, yeah.
The family's telling us that they were trying to get an autopsy done in the days following Arlene's death, but that you wouldn't allow it. Why were you opposed to it?
I wasn't crazy about it because I just felt Arlene had been through enough, you know, and I really just wanted to leave her be.
Did you feel that it would have cleared your name?
I didn't know that was an issue at the time.
In hindsight, do you wish that you'd requested an autopsy at the time?
Yeah, again, yeah. Probably, yeah.
Bert Westervelt says Betty Noble, the coroner on scene when Arlene's body was found, told him she saw no evidence of any injuries. And the coroner's report confirms that no injuries were found at first.
I didn't know either if the canoe come over and hit Arlene or what, so I asked her for signs of physical trauma, and Betty Noble said no. It was emphatically no, none.
When did you actually learn that they turned it into a murder investigation?
I'm not sure in the weeks that followed, but an exact date or even a month, I couldn't even tell you.
So you don't remember the moment you realized you were being investigated for murder?
I think it just kind of came slowly. It you know, things kept building to where, you know, it became clear.
Walk me through that day you were charged with second-degree murder. What happens? Like, do the cops show up on your steps?
Yeah, they showed up here. They read me my rights and said that, yeah, I was being charged.
What goes through your mind in that moment?
Just total disbelief. Never ever did I think it would get that far.
So what happens next?
Well, then they interviewed me. I was in Kelowna, I believe, 3 days. They obviously think I had something to do with Arlene's passing. They also had a policeman in the jail cell with me.
Undercover?
Yeah, no, he was pretending to be a, you know, so he had a story that was sort of similar to mine in some respects.
And then you're released on bail?
Yeah.
And what's that next period for you like?
It obviously gets much more real, and my lawyer explains to me then that it goes to preliminary hearing and eventually a trial, and you just can't believe that that's happening, but it is.
So your story changed in the days that followed Arlene's death. Do you understand why that might raise suspicion?
Yes, I do, and you know, apparently that's a large part as to the reason why I was arrested.
Did you kill your wife?
Sorry?
Did you kill your wife?
No, God, no.
Next on Crime Beat, troubling details that suggest the investigation into Arlene Westervelt's death was botched from the beginning. The family waited nearly 5 years for a coroner's report into Arlene's death. But was it murder? We now return to Jules Knox with the conclusion of Arlene Westervelt. Murder or misadventure?
Arlene's friends and family again rallying on the steps of the Kelowna courthouse 5 years after she died.
Justice for Arlene! Justice for Arlene!
From the get-go, this investigation was flawed by the coroner's service. That needs to be addressed.
The family is demanding a coroner's inquest, calling on Chief Coroner Lisa Lapointe to look into the full circumstances surrounding Arlene's death.
We ask you, Chief Lapointe, to do the right thing, even if it means casting a dark shadow on your organization.
The fact is that significant deficiencies at the BC Coroner Service resulted in failures, in this case, that remain without remedy or recourse.
I've never been involved with, investigated, or experienced a case like this that has so many gaps and shortcomings early on in the investigation.
Mike Cavilla is a retired homicide detective. The family's lawyer at the time asked him to provide an independent assessment of the case.
The body is like the crime scene. You only have one crack at it. You got to do the best job you possibly can in order to arrive at the truth. There was a lot of unanswered questions early on, and the way it was handled, medically speaking, resulted in more questions for everybody.
What in particular jumped out at you when you first heard about it?
The fact that how quickly people jumped to the conclusion that this was an accident. Was this accidental? Was this non-accidental and inflicted? Is this a homicide? None of those decisions can be made within the first hours of the events unfolding.
Cavilla says any water death that isn't independently witnessed should automatically go to a full autopsy. But that didn't happen. Authorities assumed Arlene drowned.
In this case, it was kind of putting the cart before the horse. There was assumptions made that this was an accident prior to any investigation being done whatsoever. And when I say investigation, I'm talking about history, I'm talking about circumstances surrounding that sudden death, and then the third thing is, and maybe the most important, is the medical findings found at autopsy. It's going to be key. Did the victim drown, or perhaps the victim was dead when she was rolled into the water? Because the autopsy wasn't completed in a timely fashion, important forensic evidence was lost.
4.5 years after Arlene's death, the coroner finally released its report. The only external injury found was a small bruise to Arlene's upper lip. There were no broken bones or marks on the skin of her neck, but there were hemorrhages on the strap muscles of her neck and in both eyes.
What was your reaction when you read the coroner's report in the Westervelt case?
Not to say 100%, but this is problematic because these injuries usually do point to the fact that there was physical compression of the neck prior to death. And in this case, the story from the husband has to match the medical evidence. And if it doesn't, red flag, we have to look into this further.
Well, the hemorrhages in the eyes are not common with drowning, that's for certain. Hemorrhages in the eyes can occur, and hemorrhages in the neck can occur from strangulation.
Although the report also claims the embalming didn't interfere with the forensic examination of Arlene's neck, the doctor disagrees. He says incisions made in the neck during the embalming process could be a big problem for Crown prosecutors at trial.
The incision can, of course, mask other evidence that might have been present or create evidence that may be misleading.
Ultimately, the coroner couldn't rule out the possibility that Arlene died from an underlying heart condition, drowning, or strangulation. Her cause of death was found to be undetermined.
I think that the motive certainly would be that Arlene was leaving Bert. The stories that she potentially could tell about Bert are unknown to me, but as with any family proceeding, truth comes out.
And ironically enough, the executor of the estate is Bert, who is the man who is charged with her murder.
Allegations of interference from Mountie Brian Gately and questions about the competence of the RCMP and BC Coroner Service may have muddied the waters of this case, compromising the Crown's ability to prosecute Bert Westervelt for murdering his wife.
The man charged with murder is walking free, not because he's been found innocent, but because something has gone wrong with the prosecution, and that's not justice.
I think the RCMP officers, the lead homicide investigators in Kelowna, want to see this proceed. Why does no one else want to see this case proceed? I think this case needed to be buried. I think it needed to be put away so as not to embarrass a number of people that dropped the ball. I have never wanted to believe that Bert Westervelt is guilty of killing his wife, my sister-in-law. But if he is, he needs to answer to those charges and not be given a hall pass to walk away in order to protect the RCMP, the coroner's service, the prosecution service. It's wrong. It's wrong.
Bert Westervelt maintains that there was never a solid case against him.
Arlene and I had ups and downs, but when it came down to it, there's nobody I'd rather travel with than Arlene. I said this, there's nobody I'd rather golf with than Arlene. There's nobody I'd rather hike with than Arlene. There's nobody I'd rather bike with than Arlene.
Given all the twists and turns in this case, do you understand why some people believe that you killed Arlene?
I actually don't, no. I think they just don't know Arlene and I. There's never, ever been anything physical between us. You know, did we argue? Yes. Did we get physical? Never, ever. Not once, ever. Not even the slightest little push.
What's it been like for you just not having her around?
It's just totally empty, you know. I still belong to a grief group. I still go to counseling, but it's not just on me. It's my friends' family, my family. It's been hell for a lot of people.
Good morning. Hi. How are you? Welcome to the Westervelt residence. All right.
You know, she just had such a zest for life. She was just such a joy to our family. We are left with a very, very large hole in our hearts. Our family is so broken. We miss her so much. And we want to know why she died.
The anxiety is unbearable. And we just want answers. We want justice for Arlene.
My sister was a beautiful person whose life mattered, and she deserves justice. And make no mistake, we are not going away, and we are not going to give up our fight.
There was a 1-year stay period on the second-degree murder charge against Bert Westervelt, and that expired mid-July. His name has never been cleared. The Crown says the investigation remains open, and if new evidence comes to light, it still has the ability to proceed with a new prosecution against anyone. I'm Anthony Robart. Thank you for joining us tonight on Crime Beat. Want more episodes of Crime Beat? Listen to the Crime Beat podcast now for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And for past episodes of Crime Beat, check out our YouTube page or download the Global Go app to watch on your phone.